Hi, everybody, and welcome to Astronomy on Tap. My name is Jacob, one of the organizers of Astronomy on Tap Budapest, and I'm going to be your host this evening. And before we get started, I want to encourage everybody to keep practicing your social distancing if you're able to, wash your hands, and practice good hygiene at all times. This is really important to keep up, and I know I keep saying it over and over again, but I'm going to keep saying it as long as we're doing these virtual events, so get used to it. Let's go ahead and get started with some astronomy. Tonight, we're going to be doing a current event section. Now, this is our third virtual event that we brought you, all about current events. So this is normally part of our in-person events, but since we can't be doing those anymore, we're going to try to be bringing you these on a weekly basis. So every Thursday evening, look out for a new current events video posted on our Facebook page. Now, since today is April 2nd, the day after April Fool's Day, I wanted to give you 3 stories that seem like they could not be real, like they could be an April Fool's Day prank, but actually are real. But they all relate to astronomy. So let's get started. Living in lunar urine. So astronauts plan to return to the moon. They've been planning to return to the moon for a while now, so this may not really seem like news, but this time they say that they're actually serious about it. And one of the things that they want to do once they're there is establish a permanent base on which to live. So this is important if you want to do long-scale studies and have a permanent human presence in anywhere outside of lower Earth orbit. Now, when you get there, you're going to have to live in something. But the problem is that building materials are heavy. So it's going to need to be a very strong structure. There's essentially no atmosphere at all on the moon, so it's going to need to be airtight. And there's a lot of incoming dangerous radiation from the sun, and it's going to need to be thick enough to be able to insulate the astronauts from that incoming radiation. So since building materials are heavy, they're very expensive to get to the moon. So if you think of like your house, it can be made of concrete or bricks or wood or steel, and all of that stuff that comes together weighs quite a bit. Now imagine you had to launch all of that stuff into space and then take it all the way to the moon to build something. It's going to get prohibitively expensive very quickly. So scientists started looking for something that they could use on the lunar surface to actually build something. So fortunately, the lunar surface is covered with something called regolith, which is essentially this type of dust. Now, if you take this dust and mix it with what's called a super plasticizer, it can be used to print 3D materials. So these 3D materials could be like bricks that could come together and make a structure on the moon. But where are we going to get this, this plasticizer? Well, fortunately for astronauts, urea can be used as a plasticizer. So where are they going to get the urea? Well, human urine contains about 9.3 to 23.3 grams per liter of urea. So all they have to do is collect the urine, separate out the urea, mix it with the dust, and build a house, and then they're good to go. Social distancing is hard in the outer solar system. So let's look at a brief overview of the solar system and what all is there. As I'm sure most people are aware, at the center of the solar system is the sun. That can be seen here on the left. On the first things that we encounter are the rocky planets. So this is Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. There's a few near-Earth asteroids that are in there. Just outside Mars's orbit, we have the asteroid belt. There's a lot more asteroids in there. Outside that, we have the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. There's going to be some asteroids and comets coming throughout there as well, and all of these planets have moons too. But then outside of that, we have something called the Kuiper belt. So that's kind of like the asteroid belt, except it's more icy type material. So you're going to have a lot more comets and larger icy bodies. This is also where Pluto lives, which isn't actually a planet. It could be considered a Kuiper belt object or something that comes from the Kuiper belt and in and out and kind of goes across Neptune's orbit. So the Dark Energy Survey, which is a ongoing survey to look for things like supernova, was repurposed to also look for solar system objects. And they found 300 objects using a new technique. So essentially what this Dark Energy Survey did was take a bunch of pictures of the sky and then take another picture like an hour later, and then another one, and then another one, and another one. So if you're looking for when things like supernova could start, this is a good approach because they could start at any time, and you need to look at as much of the sky as possible and as frequently as possible. But also, if you want to look for objects that are orbiting in the solar system, these frequent pictures that they're taking can be stacked together, and you can see things that move across them. And using this dark energy survey data, astronomers found 300 new objects using that technique. Now, 139 of those objects were confirmed as new trans-Neptunian objects. So that means objects kind of like Pluto that come in and out of Neptune's orbit, but mostly live there in the Kuiper Belt. Now, we think that there's like thousands and thousands of, maybe even millions of objects out there in the outer solar system, but actually not that many of them have been directly detected yet. And that's because they're far away, they're faint, they're slowly moving, and it takes a lot of time to do so. So by using this new technique, they actually found 10% of the total objects known in the outer solar system through this study right here. And they think that as these kind of studies continue on, and as new studies that are similar to them pop up in the future, they're going to be able to find thousands more of these types of objects. So it's really getting crowded out there, and it's important that all of these new objects practice their social distancing. Mercury is deflating. So Mercury, the closest planet to the sun, as you just learned from our previous sketch of the solar system, it's also the smallest planet. It's hot, it's barren, and it's mostly dead. Really, there's not a lot going on there as far as planets go. If you've ever seen a picture of Mercury and the moon side by side, they're kind of hard to tell apart. They're just these gray, plain blobs. So one thing that the Mariner 10 spacecraft observed when it flew by Mercury in the 1970s is this hilly and uneven ground, which they called the chaotic region. So this chaotic region kind of puzzled scientists. They weren't really sure why it was there, like what caused this and why is it, such as prevalent as it is. Well, when a new spacecraft went to Mercury, the Messenger spacecraft in 2011 to 2015, it studied at Mercury at a much higher resolution and with new instruments. So one of the things that they looked at was the chaotic region. So the chaotic region was originally thought to be formed when large things impacted Mercury, and it kind of rippled out on the surface and made some different hills and valleys outside of the actual craters themselves, which you can see some of the craters in this picture here. But Messenger also found that the surface is full of different volatiles that shouldn't be present. So these are different chemicals that wouldn't really exist on the surface of Mercury because Mercury has no atmosphere. It's constantly bombarded by solar radiation, and any of these kind of things should have been just stripped away a long time ago. So they came up with a new theory that these volatiles were trapped under the surface of Mercury for a long time and then started escaping from the land and deflating the surface, creating these hills and valleys that can drop more than 1 kilometer deep. And that's really the only reason that they could think, well, these volatiles would still be present on the surface of it because they have to have been put there fairly recently. One of the scientists from this was quoted saying, the chaotic region had suffered significant relief losses, almost like you have a mountain there and then suddenly half of it's missing. So not like the mountain sunk into the earth or anything like that, but it's just like kind of suddenly gone. So that sounds even more chaotic than they might have originally anticipated. So this was current events for April 2nd. Thank you for paying attention to us, and we're going to be back next week with another current events section and maybe some other content as well. And just to wrap up real quick, I want to say again, please wash your hands, practice good social distancing, maybe take a lesson from the trans-Neptunian objects and kind of be very sparsely located, only cross Neptune's orbit every once in a while if you really have to. And of course, wash your hands, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.